Classroom A, so MISTI, we're talking about servitors and how to make them, and also talking about so MISTI, which is a servitor that I made, and how to use that, and how to use her, and like kind of what her applications are. So this is a review of the week 1 stuff that I posted up in the classroom. In week 1 we had a look at what servitors are and the various kinds of things that are similar to servitors. We had a look at what servitor means, what the word comes from, the origin of it, and different kind of models of understanding what servitors are about, what are they made of, and like how do they work. The different ways of understanding them can influence how we create servitors and how we interact with them, and kind of how we think about them. You know, how we understand them has a large impact on our interaction with them, and especially on the creation of servitors. But essentially, it doesn't really matter. I mean, whatever model that you have with regards to servitors, you can still make them successfully, and you can still use them, and it will be effective. You know, so I suppose depending on how much of the chaos magic paradigm you've embraced, you know, will kind of influence how fluid you are in this respect, because you may want to choose a kind of understanding of servitors that allows you to use them more effectively, that allows you to kind of create them more easily and interact with them better. That would be good, I suppose. But we are limited sometimes by the, you know, kind of the understanding of how things work. But I mean, it's fine. And that's part of the purpose of this week 1 course that I've put together, is to kind of address the idea of what servitors are, and to kind of make that a bit more fluid, so we can have some movement on that, and to kind of broaden that idea. Because essentially, although this is week kind of, I don't know, 2 or 3 stuff that we'll be getting into later, if you ever think about servitors, I mean, what's the difference between servitors and, say, a sigil or some other kind of magical act that is performed with kind of an external focus? There isn't much difference, really. The thing with servitors is that we anthropomorphize them, and we give them a name and a face, and we kind of interact with them, and we expect them to have some kind of longevity. Whereas with a sigil or some kind of other magical working, like with an external focus, we don't. You know, we just kind of make the sigil and kind of throw the will out there and kind of, you know, do that. But essentially, they're the same things, really. And also, you know, depending on your perspective and the kind of level of depth that you want to look at this whole thing. I mean, what are servitors? You know, we had a look at tulpas and thought forms, and it's like spirits, kamis, and ghosts, and stuff like that, which are all really interesting, because they all do tie up to the servitor thing. Because I mean, essentially, when we create a servitor, we're wanting some kind of external agency to do things for us, to some kind of intent that we have, that we're wanting to complete. And if we have a look at the folklore and mythology and stuff going back, you will see that there are a lot of these things. There are, things external to us, like ghosts and spirits and so on. And depending on what tradition you kind of subscribe to, you might even say angels and demons and gods and ancestors, animal totems and the kind of allies, plant allies, that kind of stuff, guardian angels, whatever, all of these kind of things, practically kind of are the same, really, because they're external to us, in a way that we don't consider them, part of our ego, part of our self-identity. And they seem to have some kind of alignment or affinity with a particular current, or some kind of archetypal, alignment. They have a specific thing that they're kind of focused on, and that they do, or that they work with, or something like that. In African traditional medicine, there are a lot of ancestors that people work with, primarily, and the different ancestors are responsible for different things. So you get one ancestor that deals mainly with healing, and one that deals with more offensive stuff like cursing enemies and so on. But each of them are a specific kind of archetypal, symbolic, anthropomorphized representation of a particular intent, which is the same with servitors and with magic to some extent. Like sigils and stuff, although we don't tend to anthropomorphize that. But like I said in the text over here, the reason for making a servitor instead of a sigil or some other kind of magical working, longer duration of effect, because a servitor, you can set it up to kind of continually work at something, and if you make it so that it's feeding and it's kind of sustaining itself reliably, it'll just carry on doing what you told it to do, kind of indefinitely, until either the goal is complete, or gets kind of dispelled, or you tell it to stop, or something like that. Whereas a sigil may have a shorter duration of effect. It's more of a once-off kind of thing, I suppose, unless you do it. But anyway, a servitor is more convenient in that way, in that you can set it up to continually, push for something, whatever that desire is, or things that you find yourself doing magic for regularly. For example, like healing or something like that. If this is something that you find yourself doing often, it may be more efficient and more powerful, kind of in the long term, to make a servitor for it instead of doing a separate magical working each time, because the servitor will kind of grow as it goes along and gains experience. And also, you don't need to do the magical working again each time that you want to do this thing, because the servitor is there. You can just call it and tell it what to do, and that'll be kind of more efficient in that way. So that's useful. More complex tasks, servitors are good at that, because the more intelligent servitors have some kind of discernment. They can approach a problem from multiple angles, and if you do it carefully and you build them well, they can have some kind of discernment as to how to approach particular situations, which is useful, because often what happens, with magical workings, is that the results kind of come about in an unexpected way, and that can be a problem sometimes. But with the servitor, I think it might be more reliable. Not to say that you don't get unexpected results. Sometimes you certainly do, but instead of the will just kind of being generally thrown out there into the universe and kind of waiting for something to happen, I think it's more of like a targeted kind of more specific intent. You know what I mean? And it may kind of be less prone to being distracted or dissolved or kind of changed by external influences, because it does have its own kind of focus and direction that it's pushing for, which is useful. What else? Some kind of intelligence is discernment and is needed. Situations with multiple components. Generally, the servitor will be. There we go. All that kind of stuff. Oh, unconscious creation. This is something that I mentioned in the first lesson, and it ties up with the ghosts and the yokai and that kind of stuff, poltergeist activity and all that, because it's folklore and mythology around the world, has reports of interactions with these kind of external entities, gremlins or demons or whatever, and I kind of believe that many of them are kind of unconsciously created by people, because we had a look at Shintoism here and some of the Japanese folklore, which focuses on the idea that emotions tend to kind of cling to physical stuff, and people, when they die, their will, their energy kind of continues without them. Which ties up with something that we'll be exploring later. That's the idea that that we are kind of servitors in a way, in that yeah, no, we'll get into that later, but it's an interesting thing to explore. Yeah, so unconscious creation, that's it's a thing, and it's something that needs to be carefully dealt with. And it also kind of ties up with the idea that anthropomorphizing things is a powerful tool for dealing with them, because some kind of unpleasant influence, be it an unhappy feeling or some kind of melancholy or depression or anxiety, I suppose, to some extent, although that should be dealt with by a trained kind of therapist, it can be a useful tool to kind of see these things as an external influence and put a face on them, maybe give them a name and so on, and then they can be banished and they can be dealt with and bargained with or spoken to, that kind of stuff. It's similar to something that I use sometimes in therapy with my clients with hypnosis, called parts therapy, is when a particular thought or subconscious thing is made, is given a voice, and is you can speak to it and you can kind of reason with it and understand what the story is, which is very useful, and it's a very powerful tool, and it allows people to kind of access and deal with these things which they would not normally be able to, which is great. So yeah, unconscious creation, but it is something that needs to be done carefully, because especially with like depression and anxiety, if people are prone to, if they're in a bad space and they give this thing a name and human kind of characteristics, it might just empower it, and it might just make it harder to deal with, because if they're the victim and they're in a bad space, it'll just carry on growing and so on. It'll define it more and strengthen it. So this is something that should be done carefully, and it should be done only if the person is kind of fairly confident that they can use it to their advantage, use it as a tool to leverage their way out of this thing. Because also what you don't want to do is you don't want to kind of externalize your anxiety and your depression, and make some kind of thought form or servitor out of it, because then it can grow and it'll be a problem. So yeah, that should be done carefully. All right. What else? Shintoism we had a look at, which is really interesting, and I think the way that they deal with spirits and stuff is spot on, because it kind of fits with my own experience of how things work, and it seems to be an accurate representation, and pretty good kind of paradigm to work with if you're doing a lot of servitors and you're dealing with spirits and that kind of stuff. It's very useful. What else do we have here? Oh, getting rid of servitors and external influences. One of the ways to do that is like I mentioned, if these things are kind of thought forms or some kind of magical energy or will or something that has taken on a life of its own, even the things that are not kind of considered to be from us, like ghosts and poltergeist, demons, whatever, if all of these things are created around a particular archetype or current or direction, and if that is taken away from them, or if that is if they're unable to fulfill that, they kind of lose reason to be. They kind of lose definition and fall apart. So a powerful tool to use with this kind of thing is if you should find yourself under on the receiving end of some kind of negative stuff from one of these things. A useful tool to do is to make a doll or some kind of simulacrum of yourself, some kind of external representation of yourself, like I said, a doll or a picture of yourself or something like that. And then what you can do is you can bury that or put it somewhere safe, and you can try and convince this thing to attack the representation of yourself instead of you, and that can work. That can work well. So yeah, that is a useful thing to remember. But I mean, there are other ways to handle it, but that's kind of a quick and dirty way of sorting it out. Alright, okay, maybe I should stop talking now because there's still quite a lot to get through, and we're already on 17 minutes now. So yeah, I'll just upload this so long, and we can carry on talking a bit later. Oh yeah, no, names are fascinating, because another way of dealing with these things is using the names of different gods, or taking the thing's name and using that against it, because names are very powerful and they are the sigil of this thing. It's something that I find really useful, and we'll speak a bit more about it later when we're creating our own servitors. The name of the servitor itself becomes like the sigil, the audio sigil of the thing. So you don't really need to use a sigil or draw it out, to summon the thing or to kind of connect it, because the name itself is the sigil for the thing, or is a sigil for, and it allows you to connect straight towards this servitor of your choice. Yeah, I've done that with some MISTIs, and when you do say the name, you should be able to quite clearly feel that energy. She's very responsive and kind of happy to contact people. So that's quite cool. But yeah, okay, so getting rid of these things, names of gods, or using the name itself, like you'll see in a bit later when we talk about golems and the Chinese vampires and stuff like that, how the name is used to control it or to give it life, and it can also be used to get rid of it. And there are plenty of stories of the true name of something having power. And I mean, even if you look at the old high magic stuff about summoning spirits and so on, is when you have the name of the thing, then you can control it. And this is basically the way it works, because the name defines it, and the name is the sigil of the thing. So it's a very powerful bargaining tool to have. So yeah, that's another tool that you can use, not only for creating servitors, but also for getting rid of them if you should find the need for that. So much to speak about. Alright, so that's the first video. We'll carry on talking a bit later. Thanks.